With Season 8 turning 5 blessing options into a total of 33 starter item options, I'm sure many of you have questions about what to build in the new season. Well, hopefully this video can clear that up for you. Today we're going to rank all new starter items out of 10. Since the new starters effectively have 3 parts, I'm going to be rating each one individually and combining their score at the end. So if Death's Toll is rated 6 out of 10, Death's Embrace is rated 8 out of 10, and Death's Temper is rated 10 out of 10 for example, that gives an average score of 8 out of 10 for the item overall. Also, despite popular belief, I'm not a Smite oracle, I can't predict the future, I may be wrong on some of these. We're very early in the PTS cycle, and not only could I just be wrong because I haven't had enough time to try them, but items could also change coming out of the PTS. That's definitely happened before, and if some of these items are changed significantly before they hit the live client, then my opinion here will be slightly outdated. So keep that in mind while I'm rating these, but let's jump in. But first, we all know how long Smite ranked queues can be. Wouldn't it be great if you had a game you can play anytime, anywhere, even from your pocket? Well, Raid Shadow Legends has got you covered. I've had many journeys in Teleria while playing Raid, but my hard carry champions are always Martyr and Harvest Jack. Being a solo main, tanks are my jam, and Martyr is the best there is. Her damaging skills scale with how much defense she has, and her third skill, Suppression, halves the attack of all enemies. I don't think I need to tell you that that's huge. As for Thanatos, I mean Harvest Jack, this guy is a debuff machine, with all of his skills providing some kind of crazy crowd control, debuff or status effect. His basic attack can even steal enemy buffs to make them his own. No buffs for you. I love these two in combination with a strong damage dealer. The attack debuffs and buff steals combined make my squishy damage dealer insanely hard to take down as they wipe the floor with levels and bosses. And last month, Raid released their biggest update ever, the Doom Tower. With 120 floors, secret challenge rooms and 12 badass bosses, there's never been a better time to jump into Raid. Click the link in the description to claim a free Ancient Shard, XP booster, and tons of other awesome rewards. And to help you conquer the Doom Tower, Raid are giving away a free champion, Bulwark, just for you. Find your bonus rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days, and I'll see you guys in game. But with that said, let's jump in with the solo lane starters. First up is Bluestone Pendant. The base form of the item is incredible. The base stats aren't great, but the regen is very overlooked from a solo lane perspective, and the passive really helps out a lot of gods with early wave clear. We've seen Bluestone before of course, and it was good then and will still be good now. 8 out of 10. Bluestone Brooch amps up the stats and passive effect to deal 7.5% current health in addition to the base 25. You can basically take this as half that value since it's current health not maximum health, so 3.25% max health damage equivalent on average. That's between 60 and 90 damage depending on if you're hitting a tank or a squishy at level 20, so we're looking at roughly between 85 and 115 extra damage per ability. Quite strong but not completely broken. 7 out of 10. Corrupted Bluestone skews more towards damage and less with regen. The passive turns into a flat 75 damage plus an attack speed reduction of up to 20% on enemies hit and an attack speed gain for you of 15% per enemy hit, up to 5 enemies, giving a total of 75% attack speed. On paper, this item seems really good, but it will be niche given you need a god with strong AoE damage abilities that also uses basic attacks very well. There's not too many of those, especially in solo lane. But in that situation, I think this can be really strong, but given its niche, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. So in total, Bluestone has an average score of 7.3 out of 10. Hopefully you understand the rating system now, let's move on to Warrior's Axe. This is the replacement for Warrior's Blessing, and the base form functions very similarly. The stats are actually a little stronger now. Warrior's Blessing sees play right now, so I expect Warrior's Axe to be solid on gods that don't abuse Bluestone or Death's Toll in solo. 8 out of 10. Sundering Axe amps up the stats and passive to 10% of current health on a 7-second cooldown. Taking the halving rule for current health, we can equate this to roughly 5% max health on hit on average, which is between 100 and 150 extra damage, which also heals you the same amount. There are similarities to Bluestone Brooch here, but with a different use case. Overall, this seems strong, but definitely not game breaking. A good default option for a safe pick in solo. 7 out of 10. Hero's Axe, however, seems really strong. Way better than Sundering Axe in terms of stats, with 300 health, 35 of each protections, and a whopping 30% CCR, which is a super undervalued stat in its own right. With a passive that gives a nearby allied god that is hard crowd controlled a shield equal to 10% of your max health. Yet your max health, not theirs. So if you're a tank with 3k HP, that's a 300 health shield on your backline carry. And on only an 8-second cooldown as well. The only issue with this item is that you need to be backlining for the most part, and solo laners tend to be frontliners, not backliners. But in the case where you can make this item work, it will be insanely strong. 8 out of 10. That gives Warrior's Axe an overall score of 7.7 out of 10. And finally, for solo lane items, we have Warding Sigil. 100 health, 15 magical procs, and a passive that can provide up to 10 flat damage reduction, this item is way too niche to be given a high score in my opinion. It's only useful against magical solos, which are already about 1/4 of total solo lane matchups. In the situations where it is useful, it's very good, especially with the 10 flat damage reduction being able to tank minions and play aggressive, but it's incredibly niche as it is right now, 5 out of 10. Sigil of the Old Guard amps up the stats and changes the passive from flat reduction to 4% reduction, which can stack up to 3 times now for a total of 12%. The base stats are passable but not amazing, however the passive here is very nice. 12% reduction pretty much permanently in a teamfight is very powerful. However, because of the base form being so niche, you can't always pick this up, you need to be in a magical solo lane matchup to make use of this, even if you wanted to, so I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Infused Sigil balances out the defense stats and switches the damage reduction for a damage boost, dealing 400 magical damage in an AoE around you after you get hit by 5 abilities. The base stats are pretty attractive on the item, however the passive doesn't look great to me. 5 abilities is a lot, even in a hectic teamfight. This doesn't stack from tick damage, so you do need to be hit by actually 5 different abilities. And even then, there's a 0.5 second delay, meaning you may not always get the damage off. I've yet to try this one in game, and I could be way off, but it doesn't look great on paper. However, the stats are quite nice, so I'll give it a 6 out of 10, which gives a total average score for Warding Sigil of 6 out of 10. Moving on to ADC items, first up we have Death's Toll. This is very similar to the original Death's Toll and provides on-hit healing from basic attacks. This can be built on any god, which is a nice boost over the original, which was physical only. I've already seen this item shine in multiple roles on the PTS, and given its history, I have to give it a 9 out of 10. Death's Embrace is the amped up version, driving up the stats and passive effect to 3% of max health and mana on hit. I have to give this one a 10 out of 10, just putting it out there. I said from the moment this item was data mined and in the patch notes as well that 3% max health shouldn't be a thing, and I've already seen this version of Death's Toll wreak havoc on the PTS. On my stream last week, there was a Bellona soloing Fire Giant with this item, and she isn't even the best use case for it. I said it a while back, and I'll say it again, 3% heal is not okay. As for Death's Temper, I've seen this one a lot less, be that because Embrace is overshadowing it or because it's not that good, I don't fully know, but this version leans into more attack speed and the passive is a stacking basic attack power buff up to 35% at 10 stacks. On paper, these stats are completely and utterly busted, 50 power, 30% attack speed, 35% basic attack power, and even 100 health thrown in there as well. However, you need to understand that the passive likely won't be fully stacked in a teamfight unless you're already winning. You get 5 stacks from a god kill or assist, which is nice, but to stack this from minions or camps you have to be out of the fight. This one is very tough to evaluate properly without a lot of playtime, which I haven't had time to put in yet, so take this one with an extra grain of salt, but for now, I'm giving this one 7 out of 10, which gives Death's Toll an overall score of 8.7, our strongest item yet. Next up is Gilded Arrow. This one is sort of the replacement for Hunter's Blessing, but not quite the same thing. It has a farming minigame built into it where a minion is marked, and if you last hit that minion, you get bonus gold, mana, and attack speed. I've only tried this one once, but it did feel quite good using it. I was out farming the enemy ADC by a decent amount, but this one does have a bit of a drawback in actually boxing. It will get out-traded by something like Death's Toll, so I think this is more of a passive farmer type ADC item, but I do think it's solid. I'll give it 7 out of 10 for now. Diamond Arrow ups the stats to 80 basic attack damage and 100 health, plus the passive can now stack up to 3 times for a potential of 60% attack speed. And much like Death's Temper, killing a god gives you 3 stacks instantly, but also like Death's Temper, I'm not big on these items that require minion deaths to reach their full effectiveness. It means you have to start a fight not at full power and only after getting a kill or something do you start performing at your best. Items like this can work, Bloodforge is a good example of that, but they're often quite sketchy, especially as a starter item. The stats are insane if you do get it fully stacked, however, which means I'll still give this one a 6 out of 10. Ornate Arrow is my upgrade of choice for this one though. This one has slightly weaker base stats with 20 less basic attack damage but 50 more health. The passive is where the difference comes in though. All sources of gold gain are increased by 20%, which is very nice, but don't be fooled, this item comes online very late in the game, so you're not going to be getting this bonus gold throughout the early or mid game, which is when you need it the most. But the main part that I think makes this version so good is that for every 100 gold in hand you have, you gain 1% attack speed and 0.8% crit chance up to 25 stacks. So in total, that's 25% attack speed and 20% crit on top of the base stats of the item. Now, I know I said I don't like items with a condition for their full power, but I think it's much easier to hold gold in hand than it is to start killing minions right before a team fight starts. This can stop you from buying into other items, which is a relevant drawback, but the stats you gain from holding the gold are almost worth an item in themselves, and if you are at full build with nothing else to spend your gold on other than potions, this becomes one of, if not the best starter item in the game. So I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10, which gives Gilded Arrow a total score of 7 out of 10. And finally for ADCs, we have Leather Cowl. The base form has insanely good stats. When you're duo laning early game with the support, the passive gives 10% attack speed, meaning the total stats of the item are 15 power, 10% lifesteal, and 15% attack speed, way more than almost any base item that I've seen. At least for ADCs anyway. When your support leaves, that attack speed trades for 5% movement speed, which is probably worse in the laning phase, but is still nice. The base form gets a 9 out of 10. Hunter's Cowl amps up the stats and turns the 10% attack speed into a 25% attack speed aura and the 5% movement speed into 10%. This form is once again just a really nice pile of stats. By level 20 you're going to be team fighting a majority of the time, and so that 25% attack speed aura will be getting great use. And if it's active, this item has really insane stats compared to a lot of other starter items, so on paper I'll give this one an 8 out of 10, but I will admit I've not had a chance to try this one yet. Leather Cowl, however, is kind of trash in my opinion. The base stats are very weird, gaining 300 health which isn't that useful for hunters, and the passive changes to outnumber. For each allied god near you, you gain 1 stack, and for each enemy god near you, you lose 1 stack, so basically for every additional ally you have over the enemies you get a stack, giving 3% increased power to all nearby allied gods. Keep in mind, much like the attack speed from Hunter's Cowl, auras apply to yourself as well as allies. This one just seems weird to me. If you ever get in a position where the passive is extremely useful, you've sort of already won the fight. If you have a 3-man advantage in a team fight, 9% power is really nice, but it's sort of over most of the time. And this wouldn't even be a good choice on maybe a jungler or a solo laner because they're diving the backline away from their own allies so they don't get good use of the passive. If it worked in reverse and you gained a stack for each enemy and lost 1 for each ally, I could maybe see it being a little better on those dive characters, but as it is, this one seems like a dud, 4 out of 10, which gives Leather Cowl an overall score of 7 out of 10. Moving into mage items, first up we have Vampiric Shroud. Another item from the past that's tried and true. I think this has even better stats than its previous iteration, which was always a solid option. I see this seeing play on quite a lot of mages to be honest as a base form, 9 out of 10. Bloodsoaked Shroud amps up the stats and passive, plus allows the passive to stack magical lifesteal infinitely. The stacks do expire after 6 seconds, so they're not permanent, but as long as you keep hitting an ability every 6 seconds, you can stack this lifesteal as high as you want. I haven't tried this one yet and it's really tough to evaluate on paper given it's theoretically insane, but we need to test how realistic it is to get a lot of lifesteal with this. But it could be decent on gods with low cooldown, easy to hit spam abilities like Hebo for example. I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. Sacrificial Shroud is a really interesting one that I have had the chance to try on PTS. The stats are similar to Bloodsoaked Shroud but skewed more towards damage than defense. But the passive makes your abilities do 15% more damage, but at the cost of 5% max health to use, so it basically turns mages into Thanatos. I think this is one of the items that's really strong on a few niche characters. I've tried it on Anubis, and I imagine other gods with high self-sustain and or good use of lifesteal can make this work, and I think if you can make it work, it's going to be great, 8 out of 10. Which gives Vampiric Shroud an overall score of 8 out of 10. Sands of Time is next up, which is somewhat of a Mage's Blessing replacement, giving MP5 per missing mana, power, and cooldown reduction. The base form is pretty average, I would say. Nothing crazy, but definitely not bad either. 7 out of 10. Pendulum of Ages is the beefy version, amping up the stats and giving a passive effect that gives 7 power per 10% of available mana, so up to 70 power when you're at max mana. 160 power is nothing to laugh at, however, that's all this item gives really. 10% cooldown is nice and mana regen is pretty good too, but it's mostly just a pile of stats. I don't think this is an amazing item to be honest. Compared to other starter items, it's pretty meh, and even compared to some basic items like Rod of Tahuti, which gives the same 160 power but always, regardless of your mana cost, and has a useful passive on top of that, only at the cost of 10% cooldown, this item seems to fall flat. Of course, Rod is more expensive, but generally these starter items are positioned to be better than most basic items, and this one kind of isn't, so 6 out of 10 just for the fact that 160 power is a lot. Moving on to everyone's favourite item, the alternate timeline. While I don't like the design of this item, in terms of power level, it's not even very good. The base stats are quite good actually, but the passive effect, while game changing in some situations, is on a 10-minute cooldown. Considering you only get an upgraded starter at 20 minutes at the very earliest, you're mostly looking at 1 use of this item per game, maybe twice if the game's on the longer end. I just don't think that's worth sacrificing your most powerful item slot for. I can only see this being good if you know an important fight is coming up and you can win the game from it, then maybe this is decent. As a generic pickup though, I wouldn't recommend it. 5 out of 10. Which gives Sands of Time an overall score of 6 out of 10. Our final mage item is a weird one, Conduit Gem. Some power, mana regen, standard stuff, but the passive stacks up every second, giving your next damaging ability 2 bonus true damage, up to 20 stacks and 40 damage. I haven't had a chance to try this one yet on the PTS, and it's really one that needs a lot of testing to decide if it's good, because it could be that some gods need that extra 10 to 20 damage for their abilities to one-shot archers or the whole wave, which could make this item insane, but on the face of it, it doesn't look amazing. I'll give it a 6 out of 10, but as I said, needs more testing. Archmage's Gem is the amped up version, trading the flat 2 true damage for 2.5% of your power in magical damage, still 20 stacks meaning 50% of your power. Now the base stats completely suck, 100 power and basically nothing else is problematic for this item, but the passive is really strong on paper. Once again, could need some testing and I haven't tried this one, but an extra 50% of magical power late game can be upwards of 300 to 400 damage. That could make some mages really strong on magnifying their first hit in a teamfight. Think a Scylla 1-2 combo, maybe it would normally leave you on 400 health, but if Archmage's Gem activates at 20 stacks, you're dead. I'll give this one a 7 out of 10, it seems potentially strong on certain picks. And finally for mages, Gem of Focus. Trading some power for health and the passive to a stacking buff every time you cast an ability up to 3 stacks. These stacks give 3% movement speed, 3% damage increase and 2% damage reduction, so 9% speed, 9% increase and 6% reduction. This one I think is really strong, especially on mages with low cooldowns like Hebo. If you can keep this on 3 stacks for most of a teamfight, the stats it's giving you are actually insane. So as long as you have an ability or two that are under 10 seconds, ideally significantly under 10 seconds to give you some wiggle room and you don't have to cast them as soon as they come off cooldown, this item will be really great. I'm giving this one an 8 out of 10, which means Conduit Gem gets an overall 7 out of 10. Moving on to our penultimate role, Jungle, let's start with Boomba's Dagger. This is basically Assassin's Blessing but with some changed stats and is very similar to the old Boomba's Mask. I think this could become the go-to, at least early in the season, because it's familiar and safe. I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. Boomba's Spear, the amped up version, gains some power and ups the health and mana stats, plus the passive is much improved, giving more mana, health and damage, plus additional gold. This will now also proc on jungle bosses as well. This one to me just seems a little weak. In a late game teamfight, that passive is going to be near useless, and the base stats of the item aren't good enough to make up for that. I'll give this one a 5 out of 10. Boomba's Hammer is the better option for the upgrade in my opinion. A wide spread of useful stats for a jungler, though notably no power, which is a bit of a drawback. But the passive, unlike Boomba's Spear, is pretty solid. It's like a much beefier Hydra's Lament. After casting an ability, your next basic attack deals 80 true damage extra and reduces your active cooldowns by 1 second, as well as healing you for 5% max health. I still don't think this is amazing, but if you're going to go the route of Boomba's Dagger, which I think a lot of people will at the start of the season, this is the choice I would make. 7 out of 10. Which gives Boomba's Dagger an overall score of 6.3. Eye of the Jungle is a pretty strong base item in my opinion. The stats it comes with are great and the passive gives you a damage boost to camps similar to Boomba's Dagger, plus you gain a 30-second ward after killing a camp. It lacks the sustain of Boomba's but should allow you to clear a bit faster. 8 out of 10. Seer of the Jungle is a very niche but in my opinion high potential item. Amped up stats and a passive that allows you to see enemy wards for 10 seconds after clearing a camp. I think in high level games where you know the enemy will be warding and there will be sentry walls in common locations, this item could be a game changer. However, in lower to mid level play and casual pub games, I think this will be pretty trash, so I'll give it an overall score of 6 out of 10. Protector of the Jungle, however, is the go-to option for the upgrade in this tree. Great stats, especially if you use the 35% attack speed well, and the passive is just crazy. 15% power and protections while in the jungle, simple but effective. Given most late game teamfights happen in the jungle around objectives, you're going to be getting a ton of value from this passive, and if you are activating this, it's got insane stats for the cost, 9 out of 10, which gives the Eye of the Jungle a total score of 7.7 out of 10. And finally for junglers, we have Mannequin Scepter. 10 basic attack damage, 15 physical procs, 3 damage reduction, and a passive that deals 20 damage over 2 seconds and reduces attack speed by 7% on enemies hit by your basic attacks. This can stack up to 4 times, and jungle monsters take 2.5 times damage. So this item is not only a decent option in jungle, but it's also seeing some early play in ADC from the PTS. From what I've seen, this item is at least an 8 out of 10. Mannequin Mace is the amped up version. Better stats, better passive, and jungle bosses can now be hit by the passive effect. In total, each basic attack deals 240 extra damage to jungle monsters and bosses, meaning you can burn objectives really fast late game, further lending credence to this item as a valid ADC choice. But I have seen it do well in jungle too, especially on basic attack focused junglers like Erlang Shen or Arachne. 8 out of 10. And Mannequin Hidden Blade provides similar base stats but skewed more towards damage, with a passive that if you're out of combat and hit an enemy god, jungle monster or jungle boss, they instantly take 15% current health as physical damage and get slowed. So this is one I've not seen or tried yet, so it will be hard to rate on paper. 15% current health is nice, especially if you're initiating the fight to hit a full health target. And of course you can just instantly do 15% current health to Fire Giant, which is really nice as well. For now, I'll give this one 7 out of 10, but I could be a bit off on this one, which gives Mannequin Scepter an overall score of 7.7 out of 10. And last but not least, we have the support options. First up is the Guardian's Blessing Replacement and Watcher's Gift Reimagined, Sentinel's Gift. Defensive stats and a passive that gives 7 bonus gold, 12 health and 8 mana on minion assists. This is basically Guardian's Blessing but a bit better and will likely be the go-to for supports, at least early on while they get their footing. It's also incredibly cheap at only 500 gold. 9 out of 10. Sentinel's Boon is the amped up version, has solid defense stats, similar to a fully stacked Urchin actually, plus the passive now restores 3% health and mana and gives 15 bonus gold. Given the nature of support and the fact that these items come online at level 17 instead of level 20, the bonus farm will still be important at that point in the game, and healing 18% of health and mana just for standing next to a minion wave could give some much needed sustain to supports. An honestly underrated option in my opinion, I'd say 8 out of 10. Sentinel's Embrace comes with less base stats but an insane passive effect, splitting 120 of both protections between you and all nearby allies, so if you're in the backline with your mage and ADC, that's 40 procs for each of them and 40 for you as well. This item in my opinion seems completely and utterly broken and I can only give it a 10 out of 10, if I could give it an 11 I would. That gives Sentinel's Gift a total score of 9 out of 10, beating out Death's Toll for our new strongest item so far, but at least it's for supports and not for those filthy ADCs, am I right boys? Benevolence is next up. Instead of assisting minions for bonus farm, this one simply gives you extra XP5 and GP5, that's experience per 5 seconds and gold per 5 seconds for those that don't know, effectively giving you passive XP and gold gains. You also share 10% of your gained XP and gold with a nearby ally if possible, which has potential to snowball your ADC and or mid laner early in the game. This is another one that needs a lot of testing on math to figure out whether it's good, and so I'm going to give it a middle of the road rating of 7 out of 10 for now. It could be much better or worse than this though, it's unclear right now when we're so early in the PTS. Compassion is the beefed up upgrade with more stats and a passive that up to 15% of damage taken by nearby allies is redirected to you. This one is interesting and works similarly to Sentinel's Embrace in a way, though much weaker. I don't see much reason to buy this when you could just go Sentinels instead, but it's not an inherently bad effect by any means, so I'll give it 7 out of 10. Animosity is a really interesting one though. Tons of health and a passive that your basic attacks deal 4% of your max health as magical damage, with that being doubled versus structures. This is weird given supports aren't known for strong basic attacks or attack speed synergies, but I think this will be strong on like only a select few gods. But where it does shine, I think it could be potentially game breaking. Given its niche applications though, I can only give it 6 out of 10, which gives Benevolence a total score of 6.7. And last but, well, actually least, we have War Flag. The base version of this item is actually very strong. Great base stats and a passive that is going to be really useful for aggressive laning pairs in duo, 8 out of 10. However, the upgrades are a different story. War Banner has amped up stats, the passive restores 1% health and mana instead of the flat values, and the buffs are increased. This item has the same problem as others I've talked about in that it's incredibly difficult to find minions to kill right before a teamfight happens, and you will struggle to get max value from this item in those late game teamfights. This one is especially egregious given you need not only yourself, but someone else to come and clear a wave with you. It's way too many hoops to jump through for an item that isn't even as strong as something like Sentinel's Embrace. 5 out of 10. Spartan Flag is much of the same, very similar stats on a situational passive that usually won't get full benefit from. However, this time it's because it summons a stationary flag that you have to stand near to get the benefits. Smite teamfights are fast and fluid, you aren't standing in the same spot for very long, and I don't see this item being too useful, despite a 10% power increase being quite good. Also 5 out of 10, which gives War Flag a total score of 6 out of 10. And finally, we have the one neutral starter item, Tainted Steel. Some power and defense plus 20% anti-heal on hit. Simple and somewhat effective, though I don't really see a huge need to have anti-heal online this early in the game. It's not the worst though, so 6 out of 10. Tainted Breastplate amps up the stats and takes the passive up to 50% anti-heal. I can only assume this stacks with other items, meaning you can apply 80% with one hit if you have Brawlers and Divine. That's really strong against healers, but also very niche and does cut off your access to more generally useful starter items, so I'll give this one a 6 out of 10 also. And finally, Tainted Amulet. Stats plus the passive now steals the healing instead of just reducing it, but still only 20% anti-heal. I assume the heal steal only applies to the 20% and not to any other anti-heal you apply, and in that case, it's not amazing. Yeah, it's not the worst, but do you really want to pass on some of the other really strong starter item options just for this? Get Divine, Brawlers, Pestilence, etc. instead. 5 out of 10. Which gives Tainted Steel a total score of 5.7 out of 10. And here's the rankings. Strongest item in my opinion is Sentinel's Gift at 9, and the weakest is Tainted Steel at 5.7. This video took a lot of time to put together, and if you watched until the end, you probably enjoyed it, so why not subscribe for all things Season 8? I'd really appreciate having you along for the ride. But with that said, I'll catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.